some or the other thing. They don't dare take shelter in the lotus feet of Krishna and committing emotional service to Krishna, but then they refuse, and they have to fall back down again into the hearts. And they usually do things like so-called spiritual organization, philanthropical work. They'll have to do something if they don't engage in emotional service. This world, it's important to understand, this world is, although it's temporary, therefore it's called asatya. It's not impermanent, but it's not false. It's illusory. It makes us think it's something that is not. It makes us think that it's what we think. Less we engage in emotional service. It's the personality. We should not remain in Lord Krishna is saying, Arjuna, take the my devotional service and come quickly back to God. No one should remain in this state, full as it is in misery. So less intelligent people. At least, Sushila Bhakti is saying here, that everyone should attach himself to the bosom of those fingers and not eternally. The devotional service of the Lord is the only process by which all problems, all faculty of faith can be solved. Everyone should therefore take the Krishna consciousness and lead his life with it. So this world is a very wonderful place, because here, take the Krishna consciousness, end all miseries. Yet another word, go back home, back to God, everyone. Another transcendental service. Not this stuff. Especially Sri Sri Radha Krishna. That's the highest perfection, highest bliss. This world is miserable. Birth, death, old age, and disease. Nobody can escape these four miseries except by surrendering to Krishna and engaging in Krishna consciousness and becoming happy. Then one escapes these four miseries and goes back home, back to God. Anybody else have some comments?
The translation of the book. Chapter 9, text 34. Chapter 9, text 34, Bhagavad Gita. Engage your mind always in thinking of me. Offer obeisances and worship me. Be completely absorbed in me. Surely you will come to me. Purport. In this verse, it is clearly indicated that Krishna consciousness is the only means of being delivered from the clutches of this contaminated world. Sometimes unscrupulous commentators distort the meaning of what is clearly stated here, that all devotional service should be offered to the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Krishna. Unfortunately, unscrupulous commentators divert the mind of the reader to that which is not at all feasible. Such commentators do not know that there is no difference between Krishna's mind and Krishna. Krishna is not an ordinary human being. He is absolute truth. His body, mind, and he himself are one in absolute. It is stated in the Kurma Purana that as it is quoted by Bhakti Siddhanta Sarasvati Goswami in his Anubhashya comments on Chaitanya Charitamrita, 5th chapter, Adi Leela, verses 41 through 48. Deha Dehi Vipedo Yam Neshvare Vidyate Kwabchit, which means that there is no difference in Krishna, the Supreme Lord, between himself and his body. But because they do not know the science of Krishna, the commentators hide Krishna and divide his personality from his mind or from his body. Although this is sheer ignorance of the science of Krishna, some men make profit out of it, misleading the people. There are some who are demonic. They also think of Krishna, but enviously, just like King Kamsa, Krishna's uncle. He was also thinking of Krishna always, but he thought of Krishna as his enemy. He was always in anxiety, wondering when Krishna would come to kill him. That kind of thinking will not help us. One should be thinking of Krishna in devotional love. That is bhakti. One should cultivate the knowledge of Krishna continually. What is that favorable cultivation? It is to learn from a bona fide teacher. Krishna is the Supreme Personality of Godhead, and we have several times explained that his body is not material, but is eternal, blissful knowledge. This kind of talk about Krishna will help one become a devotee. Otherwise, understanding Krishna from the wrong source will prove fruitless. One should therefore engage his mind in the eternal form, the primal form of Krishna, with conviction in his heart that Krishna is the supreme. He should engage himself in worship. There are hundreds of thousands of temples in India for the worship of Krishna. Devotional service is practiced there. When such practice is made, one has to offer obeisances to Krishna. One should lower his head before the deity and engage his mind, his body, his activities, everything. That will make one fully absorbed in Krishna without deviation. This will help one transfer into the Krishna loka. One should not be deviated by unscrupulous commentators. One must engage in the 9 different processes of devotional service, beginning with hearing and chanting about Krishna. Pure devotional service is the highest achievement of human society. In the 7th and 8th chapters of the Bhagavad Gita, pure devotional service to the Lord has been explained apart from the yoga of knowledge and mystic yoga or fruitive activities. Those who are not purely sanctified may be attracted by different features of the Lord, like an impersonal Brahma Jyoti and localized Paramatma, but the pure devotee directly takes to the service of the Supreme Lord. This is a beautiful poem about Krishna in which it is clearly stated that any person who is engaged in the worship of the demigods is most unintelligent, and cannot achieve at any time the supreme award of Krishna. The devotee in the beginning may sometimes fall from the standard, but still he should be considered superior to all other philosophers and yogis. One who always engages in Krishna consciousness should be understood to be the perfect saintly person. His accidental non-devotional activities will diminish, and he will soon be situated without doubt in complete perfection. The pure devotee has no actual chance to fall down because the Supreme Godhead personally takes care of his devotees, of his pure devotees. Therefore, the intelligent person should take directly to this process of Krishna consciousness and happily live in this material world. He will eventually receive the supreme award of Krishna. Thus, in the Bhakti Vedanta purports up to the 9th chapter of the Srimad Bhagavad Gita, in the matter of the most confidential knowledge. That was quite a bit to digest, but yeah, the floor is open.
So this is the last text of chapter 9. And what a nice text it is. Krishna gives some wonderful instruction. Here, engage your mind always in thinking of me, offer obeisances and worship me. Very simple and sweet instructions that take us back to Godhead. So earlier in the chapter, Krishna speaks about how the entire creation he is pervaded. So the entire creation is pervaded by Krishna in his unmanifest form. And that all beings are in him, but he is not in them. He says, Mayata tamidam sarvam jagat avyakta murtina matstani sarvabhutani na chaham teshu vastutaha. So he's speaking about his mystic opulence, that by his unmanifest or impersonal form, he pervades the whole universe, and like that, everything is resting in him, but he actually in his personal feature is not resting there. He is actually situated in his supreme abode. So oftentimes the example is given that in a government, the king or the monarch or the president is at the head of the government, and by his energy, he pervades the entire government. It's not necessarily that he himself is doing everything personally, but he appoints many different cabinet members and many different administrators to do that. And so like that, his energy is spread throughout the entire kingdom even. And everything is actually happening by his will. And that whole divine monarchy, where the Lord is actually at the center of that system, is given in great detail. And the different administrative demigods are also given in their positions and their roles. And the different avatars of the Lord and expansions of the Lord are all given. Swangsha, Vibhinangsha, Angsha. All these different classifications are all given very nicely in Srimad Bhagavatam for us to understand practically who Krishna is, what his position is in the material world and in the spiritual world. So, everything is resting within him, and by his will, again and again, the creation enters into manifestation and then annihilation by his will. So that person is being described, that transcendental person is being described here by himself, actually, in the Bhagavad Gita. Another nice verse in this chapter, chapter 9, Krishna says, Mayadhyakshena prakriti suyate sacharacharam hetunanena konteya jagadvi parivardhate. He says, this material nature is working under my direction, O son of Kunti, and it is producing all moving and unmoving beings. By its rule, this manifestation is created and annihilated again and again. So, we're learning about Krishna, in practically speaking, from our perspective, we have to understand that Krishna is the Lord of this world and what his actual position is. Beyond that, he's also got his identity as Bhakta Vatsala, where he's very sweet with his devotees. But it's important for us to understand that from the perspective in the material world, Krishna is actually he's the supreme king. He's the supreme Lord. So we approach him like that. We approach him like that and we render service to him with that mood. And then we can see he gives further and further knowledge. He says, Avajananti mamudha manushim tanam ashritam. Param bhavam ajananto mama bhuta maheshwaram. That actually fools deride him when he descends in his human form. They do not know that his transcendental nature, they do not know his transcendental nature and his supreme dominion over all that be. So he clarifies. In the beginning, he's stating that he's pervading the entire creation by his impersonal form. But when he comes, actually, when he makes an appearance within the creation, that form, the two-handed form that he appears in, is transcendental. It's not material. He says, Param Bhavam, that transcendental nature. So, to correspond with that verse, let's see, what else does he say? I'm thinking of a different verse in a different chapter, but to correspond with that verse, he says, I'm forgetting the verse. Anyways, shoot, what's that verse? I'm gonna try to find it. Oh, here we go. Ajopi sanavya yatma bhutanami sharopi sam prakritim swamadistaya sambhavamyatmayaya. This is in chapter 4, text 6. Although I am unborn, my transcendental body never deteriorates. And although I am the Lord of all sentient beings, I still appear in every millennium in my transcendental form. Sambhavami atma mayaya. Sambhavami means that he incarnates. And atma mayaya means by his internal energy. So he appears millennium after millennium in his original transcendental form. So that two-handed form that appears like a human being, who the foolish, demoniac, atheistic persons deride, mistaking that form to be a part of the material creation, subject to birth, death, like that, destruction. That form is actually transcendental. Sambhavami Atma Maya. And then he says Param Bhavam. So he makes it very clear that is his original transcendental form. So basically, the devotees know this. The Mahatmas, they know this. Those persons, those great souls who have taken shelter of that divine nature, they can understand this. And they're not deluded like the atheists are, who haven't taken shelter of that. They cannot understand those things. And practically speaking, taking shelter of the divine nature means that those Mahatmas, those persons who've done that, they are fully engaged in devotional service. And in order to be fully engaged in devotional service, it starts with understanding Krishna from the proper perspective. So we're approaching him according to the parameters that he's actually set for us, the prescriptions that he's given for us. Otherwise, there's no hope. There's no hope. He says that those people who are bewildered are attracted to those atheistic and demoniac views. They don't want to surrender to the Lord. Therefore, because they don't want to surrender to him, and there is practically no hope for anything. He says their hopes for liberation, their fruit of activities, and their culture of knowledge are all defeated. So, if we take the intelligent position, we hear from Srila Prabhupada how to actually surrender to the Lord properly and follow his instructions. Then we can take shelter of the divine nature, Krishna's internal potency, and be fully engaged in devotional service, and we can know him as that Supreme Personality of Godhead. So that's a little kind of my running through chapter 9 again before we move on to the next chapter 10. So we can read chapter 10. Here we go. Let's see. Chapter 10, the opulence of the Absolute. Text 1, the Supreme Lord said, "My dear friend, mighty armed Arjuna, listen again to my supreme word, which I shall impart to you for your benefit, and which will give you great joy." Purport, the word Paramam is explained thus by Parashara Muni. One who is full in 6 opulences, who has full strength, full fame, wealth, knowledge, beauty, and renunciation, is Paramam, or the Supreme Personality of Godhead. While Krishna was present on this earth, he displayed all 6 opulences. Therefore, great sages like Parashara Muni have all accepted Krishna as the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Now Krishna is instructing Arjuna in more confidential knowledge of his opulences and his work. Previously, beginning with the 7th chapter, the Lord already explained his different energies and how they are acting. Now in this chapter, he explains his specific opulences to Arjuna. In the previous chapter, he has clearly explained his different energies to establish devotion and firm conviction. Again, in this chapter, he tells Arjuna about his manifestations and various opulences. The more one hears about the Supreme God, the more one becomes fixed in devotional service. One should always hear about the Lord in the association of devotees. That will enhance one's devotional service. Discourses in the society of devotees can take place only among those who are really anxious to be in Krishna consciousness. Others cannot take part in such discourses. The Lord clearly tells Arjuna that because he is very dear to him, for his benefit, such discourses are taking place. So we're just about out of time. We have a few more moments. Any comments, Prabhuji? Anything? Sure. Yeah.
Lord Krishna is asking us to surrender, but in our society, strangers into acting who pray to like demigods and stuff. So my question was like, what is it that we can do to get them directed to Lord Krishna? Because in our society, like, people are so fixated on praying to demigods, or we have atheists who believe that, either Lord Krishna does not exist, or praying to demigods is going to get them what they want. And how do you get to their soul, or get them to open their minds and their hearts to surrender to Lord Krishna? I mean, I'm sure you'll meet all these kind of people, like when you do like book distributions and stuff. So I guess it's just, how do I, like, if I wanted to get this message out, like, how do you get to people's hearts? Like, how do you get them to open their minds and hearts to surrender to Lord Krishna, I guess?
Well, I'm assuming when you're speaking about praying to people who worship demigods, that you're speaking about people who are probably already familiar with this Vedic system. And when it comes to those personalities, what they need most is to actually hear the Bhagavad Gita directly. So they need the philosophy. And just sit down and read the Bhagavad Gita, because there's so many things here. He says, those who study the Vedas and drink the soma juice, seeking the heavenly planets, worship me indirectly. They take birth on the planet of Indra, where they enjoy godly delights. When they have thus enjoyed heavenly sense pleasure, they return to this mortal planet again. Thus, through the Vedic principles, they achieve only flickering happiness. But those who worship me with devotion, meditating on my transcendental form, to them I carry what they lack and preserve what they have. Whatever a man may sacrifice to other gods, O son of Kunti, is really meant for me alone, but is offered without true understanding. So then they should say, okay, so I get that. Then he says, he's the only enjoyer, object of sacrifice. Those who do not recognize his transcendental nature, they fall down. Those who worship the demigods go there. Those who worship the ancestors go there. The ghosts and spirits, they go there. Those who worship him go to him. And then he offers some very nice practical advice. He says, if one offers him with love and devotion a leaf, a flower, fruit, or water, I accept it. So then you say, okay, then what are you going to do? And then they should, if they're intelligent, they should say, okay, now I'm going to offer Krishna with devotion and love, a leaf, flower, water, everything.
Right. So you see, I get that. But I'm from my personal experience, like dealing with, like, say, family members and stuff. Even though you're speaking the philosophy, you're using Bhagavad Gita. Oh, look at, it's right here. This is what Lord Krishna is saying. And, this is the main book of our religion. And why wouldn't you accept the way it is, like the way he's saying it? And that philosophy, those words that's coming out of Lord Krishna, I feel like there are times when it's like talking to a brick wall with some people. It's like it's not going through. And it comes to a point where I'm just like, Lord, you take the wheel.
Yeah, they generally like kirtan and prasad. And so you satisfy them a little bit with a nice kirtan and prasad, and then you disturb them a little bit with philosophy.
See, it's like I feel like it takes Lord Krishna's permission to get the philosophy to their minds and to their souls, to get them to open up to it, Like, that's just my take on, on things.
Yeah, but practically speaking, he's already given his permission. So we have full mission to just, but you're right, it does take empowerment.
If you run into a brick wall, don't keep. You have to run. If you run into a brick wall, don't keep bashing your head against it. Go somewhere else where you can not waste your time. Don't be attached to your relatives so much that you're going to waste all your time preaching to them if they're not. I mean, give them prasadam, give them a book, try to get them to read it. But if they just aren't accepting, then go somewhere else where they are accepting.
I had a thought of, I mean, of course, there's many different approaches, and going on Harinam, I see all kinds of different people and different reactions. And so, when it's like someone important to you in your life, of course, that's going to be a different scenario. But one verse came to mind. Krishna says, "The wise don't lament for the living nor the dead." So in Krishna consciousness, we have this higher goal, and we see what the Vedic system that he laid out, and you call it a philosophy. I understand that's the lingo, but I look at it as more like the structure of reality of what Krishna created. It's like it's the way it is. That's why it's called the Bhagavad Gita as it is. It's like this is how it is, you know. And Krishna says to Arjun, here it all is. Are your delusions done? Yeah, now okay. Delusions gone. Okay, now the shastras are your tests. Go do what you want. So sometimes you have to have a hands-off approach, but you don't always, not necessarily give up or nothing like that, especially with loved ones. But that's just my thoughts on that.
Srimad Bhagavad Gita as it is, ki jai.
Yeah.